jatketaan. So, my name is Poku. I'm a performance artist. And I've been performance artist since May 2021 in Moscow, but that's a long story. We don't dwell into that story. But my new project is to reflect on my art, and I started to write an academic dissertation for the tila-aika taide in Kuvataideakatemia, time-space art in Kuvataideakatemia. My teacher is Isoveli Karhu. I also call him Dr. Father. He's been guiding me in this work. This is about how I reflect my own art as performance artist. But may I have the next slide, please?
Next slide.
So, what is Ohm's law? Very shortly I will tell you what is Ohm's law. After that I have to speak to you a bit about the philosophy of science in order to argue how this model can be used fruitfully in analyzing and understanding performance art. But here it's a relation between voltage, current and resistance. So I give you a narrative so you can intuitively understand the nature of Ohm's law. It happened to me a couple of years ago. I was having a relation with a female kid. And she said to me on telephone that, Poku, I don't think you are a very talented performance artist. Guess how mad I was. So, I went to her apartment. She lives in the 4th floor. I ran the steps up. And here you see, when I was going up the stairs to meet her and speak with her, because she denied the fact that I'm the best performance artist in the world. This is of course the current. I'm going up the steps to meet her. But she wouldn't open the door. I said that we need to speak about the fact that you play that I'm not the most genius performance artist in the world. This is resistance. The fact that she didn't open the door brings resistance. And now you see current times resistance is the voltage. And here you see the whole picture. Current times resistance, and by mathematical knowledge you can see the rest of these. So for example, resistance is voltage divided by current and so on. But now we have to speak a bit about the philosophy of science, because the obvious question goes, this is about electrical phenomena, right? Performance art, is it by nature an electrical phenomenon? If it's not by nature an electric phenomenon, how can you apply this theory? And for this we need a bit philosophy of science to articulate how is it in principle possible to use a theory of electricity to understand performance art. Please, the next slide. So open versus closed view on science, and the next one, please. So this is the view of science that I'm fighting against, but it's very popular even today. And the closed view of science says, the field of application for a theory can be determined a priori, exempli gratia mechanistic explanation can be given only for ontologically mechanistic phenomena. This means that first of all, you know what kind of phenomenon we have. If it's a mechanistic phenomenon, then we can use mechanistic modeling. But for example, if you think that mind is not purely materialistic, then you say a priori we cannot use mechanistic model because it's not a mechanistic target. So the question goes, however, how do we know which kind of phenomena are ontologically mechanistic before we try to model them with the help of a mechanistic model and see whether we succeed or not? Let's take an analogy. Somebody says that performance art is not an electric phenomenon, and therefore we cannot use Ohm's law to apply it to performance art. And this is what this O theory is about. In this view, the world is ontologically structured, and this determines what kind of models are relevant or can be pursued. For example, if the world is ontologically structured so that we have electric phenomena and non-electric phenomena, then you cannot use electric theory for explaining non-electric phenomena. So if this would be true, then the whole point of my dissertation would not be valid. But this is not the only possible view to view science. There's a so-called open view on science, please. So, on metaphysics, however, when we postulate the world as a priori ontologically structured, we are referring here to metaphysics. Ontologically structured means that, for example, we have materialistic phenomena in the world, like houses. We have mind that is not purely mechanistic, so we need different kind of models. But we claim to know beforehand, a priori, how the world is structured, and because we know a priori how the world is structured, electrical phenomena, non-electric phenomena, this is the reason we know what kind of models to use. So we know in advance a priori that mechanistic models are universally valid because the world reality is mechanistic machines. So this is a metaphysical postulate. If you believe in universal mechanistic system, then you believe that any kind of phenomena can be modeled with the help of mechanistic models. If you're a dualist, like Monsieur Descartes, then you think that the whole world is materialistic. You can use material models, but you cannot apply them to the human mind. Because metaphysically, it's a dualist system and mind is non-material. So here we see, primary is your metaphysical worldview, which determines what kind of models you use. Once again, if we have Ohm's law and we have performance R, which is by nature something non-electric, then how can you use these kind of models? What I say here is that in this interpretation, science is subservient to metaphysics, because metaphysics tells us what kind of models are possible. The funny thing is that the majority of proponents of a closed view on science call themselves science-oriented people, even though they are metaphysically oriented people. They say to you, this model is not possible because this is a materialistic phenomenon and your model is based on something else. So, this is why I call this closed view of science, because your metaphysical worldview determines which kind of models are possible. And the metaphysical worldview kind of closes the larger picture in which you put some kind of scientific models. But in order to understand this better, we have to compare this with an open view of science, please. Next slide. The open view of science. The philosophy of science, a very good one. Nancy Cartwright once put it this way. And this is not a direct quotation, this is her point. She says about something like this, but this is her point, but not a direct quotation. But she said, if you claim chemistry is only applied physics, that means reducible to physics, then you must apply only physical models to make sense of chemical phenomena. Otherwise you speak nonsense. So, once you provide the model, only then we find out what to make out of it. Only then I am in the position to agree or disagree. So one person says that this is a chemical world, so you have to use this and this kind of models. Nancy Cartwright says that first you make the model, and then we say whether it succeeds or not, and we don't have to take in advance a priori metaphysical position. Any model can be successful or not, but it's not because we have a pre-given metaphysical worldview. Now you see, this is the argument that this is very important for me, for you to understand why is it possible to understand performance art from the point of view of Ohm's law. Here science is open-ended, not subservient to metaphysics. Metaphysics here refers to an outdated science that is transformed into dogmas. This philosophical sensitivity can also be called the modeling-based view on science. So first you construct the model, and then you see whether the model succeeds, but you, for the time being, you forget all metaphysical assumptions, whether the world is materialistic, whether it's idealistic, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So this introduction kind of opens up the space how my theory is possible. My theory is possible only if we look science from the open point. Open, if we accept the open view of science, not the closed view of science, which says that electrical theory can explain only electrical phenomena. So this is very important, very important. Next one, please. Just a minute, I have to bring. One of the pioneers of this open view of science was Thomas S. Kuhn, one of the most famous philosophers of science after the Second World War. He's written a very famous book called The Structure of Scientific Revolution. It's also translated from Finnish, Tieteellisten vallankumousten rakenne. And this represents the open view of science I was speaking about. How Kuhn starts his theory? He says that in his view, a scientific theory always begins with a promising model with which some important phenomena are explained. And these promising models are called exemplars or paradigms or even prototypes. And the idea is that you have one exemplar that is able to explain some very important phenomena, like they use Newtonian models to explain astronomical phenomena, right? But because this one model is so fruitful and successful, then you ask, can we, with the help of same kind of models, also explain very different issues? We have one working model, which is very fruitful, very ingenious, and then we try to find whether, with the help of this kind of model, we can explain different phenomena. And this is something that Kuhn calls the actualization of science. And the idea is that we don't have any kind of theory. The theory is not the important thing. What is important is some successful exemplar that we kind of actualize in different fields. Once science progresses, you try to build analogical models to the successful ones to explain other phenomena. For example, Newtonian models were first applied to astronomy, but after a century to almost anything, even economics and psychology. This is what these guys were doing. Can we understand the pig or human psyche with the help of models based on Newtonian thinking and worldview? So it was not the metaphysical postulate that the world is like this, but it was the kind of fruitful idea how to proceed. Next one. And this gives us also a new picture of what metaphysics is about. Is there any more a place for metaphysics at all in this new view? Yes, but quite a different one. In the paradigmatic view or the open view of science, metaphysics creates ontological links between the exemplars. For example, if we can apply computational models to explain how brain functions, what does this tell us on the ontological nature of the brain? So we have very, very different phenomena, brain here, computer here, but if we can use the same kind of models that were at the start to explain how computer works, and then we have the same kind of models that explain how the brain works, metaphysics is kind of lingua franca that tells us how these elements, on the one hand computer, on the other hand the brain, how they are connected, and metaphysics explains later why these same kind of models apply to brain and they apply also to computer. So metaphysics is not the basis, it's a kind of links that creates, metaphysics creates links between these successful and fruitful models. This is the metaphysics in the new key that I will, this is the third chapter of my book. And this is very important to keep in mind how this new view, open view of science differs from the old closed view of science. So, for example, if we can apply computational models to explain how brain functions, what does this tell us on the ontological nature of the brain? We can also advance recursively. If the computational model can be applied to brain functions, what does this tell about the original exemplar, the artificial intelligence? So it goes both ways. If the human mind or the big mind is like computer, but also the computer is like the mind. So metaphysics brings us these together and we can gain more understanding, so it goes both ways. Metaphysics explains how and in what sense all the different models belong to the same world. So, I apologize for speaking for this long about this issue, but this is a very common counter-argument I so often receive. People and animals say to me that Poku, Poku, Poku. Performance art is very important, but Ohm's law is about electrical phenomena, not about performance art. And this I need in order to open up the space that people and pigs can think that perhaps you can apply Ohm's law to performance art. There's no a priori or no in principle reason why this would not be done. So this is the idea of the open view of science and metaphysics. But we shall proceed. Performance art reconsidered. So, now I explain how the elements, and perhaps we look back at the second slide once again so people remember the Ohm's law.
The second.
Yes. So, once again, my girlfriend said that you're not a performance artist. I ran up the stairs to speak with her. This is the current. She does not open the door. This is assistance. And the reason she doesn't open the door brings resistance, and these together, current times resistance brings voltage. So just for you to remember. Now we go back. So, let us first take electric current. The fact that I'm running up the stairs, like in Finnish ampere, we are speaking about sähkövirta, not jännite voltage. So let us first take electric current, unit is ampere, R into consideration. This can be compared with a narrative flow when following a story. Right, when we read a book, we kind of intentionally decide not to pay attention whether what is told in the book really happened. This is the idea that we kind of go with the flow. So amperes, electric current can be seen as a kind of traditional narrative flow. You just go with the book like War and Peace, and you accept that this is fiction, and you accept not to think that is this true or is this true. You go with the story. This is the current, right? You're intentionally deciding not to compare the plot with reality, but accept the fictional nature of the story. But of course, there are certain limits. For example, if we read War and Peace, because it's a historical novel, what is essential that these kind of events could have taken place during the Napoleonic period. If the book is written that you all obviously see that this was not possible during the Napoleonic period when they talk about how armies were organized and blah, 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 then it's the minus for the book. So there is always a kind of realistic element in fiction, but it's a different kind of element in different kind of fiction. In the same sense, following Ernst Gombrich's The Story of Art, do you know the book? Probably do you know Gombrich's book, very famous.
Not that particular book, but Gombrich.
Gombrich says, for example, he speaks about Egyptian art. Do you know how the Egyptians, right, was it like?
Or is it in Finnish, it's maailmantaide history? Yes, I know that.
So the Egyptian paintings were some kind of, your body was here and your head was like this. And people say that their purpose was not realistic. They had some other purpose, like ceremonial purpose. But no! Gombrich's point of view was that this was how they really saw the reality. So they wanted to be realistic, but they just lived in a very different world from ours. So realism is always involved. But when we go further, I want you to remember that this kind of classical narrative can be compared with the current. You just accept the narrative and follow the narrative. You go with the narrative. And now we come to the next stage where I explain how this is different from performance art. Please. So now we watch my performance, The Sound of the City. So the idea of this performance was that I'm a conductor who is conducting all the sounds of the city. In city you have trees, you have cars, you have people walking, and I'm conduct by kapellimestari in Finnish all these movements. So, пожалуйста. This is from the period in 2022 when I was living together with my colleagues Aliona Teresko in Hakasalmi huvila was it. Hakasalmi huvila that is open for artists near Tokoilahti. So we dealt with reading, for example, a novel, and now we dwell with performance. I act, as you saw, as a conductor conducting the sounds of the city. All the vehicles, trees, etc. obey my commands. Here, the narrative acceptance. The narrative acceptance means that you accept that this book is not about real historical events, it's a fiction, and you just go with the flow. That's narrative acceptance. So it can be compared with the current in Ampères. Here the narrative acceptance does not articulate itself once the audience articulate resistance, and this is my most major point I want to bring out here now. So the audience is convincing themselves that it's only as if I conduct the sounds of the city. So when people see that I perfectly conduct every movement, the point is that they don't act as if they were reading the book, which means that you kind of accept that this is a fictional narrative and go with the current. You bring resistance, and the point is why. They keep convincing themselves that Poku is a perfect performance artist, but still it is only as if he conducts all the movements of the city. Why do they do this? Why don't they do this and don't act like they act when they are reading a historical novel? Why is there this kind of difference? So, where comes this difference? The performer provides a current that the audience resists. He conducts the sounds only as if. And here you see the voltage. So, the performance artist represents the current. The audience represents resistance because they keep telling themselves that it's not that in reality Poku conducts the sounds of the city. It is only as if he conducted the sounds of the city. And why is it this way? And soon we come to the final conclusions, but let us have the next slide. So, we have to speak a bit here. What is the brain like? From a philosophical point of view, what is human or big brain? As you all know, this is a human brain, but big brain is more it's more competent organ than the human brain, more capable, but we don't have to dwell on this. Human brain is also not so bad. Okay, so here you have the brain, and the next slide. So on the human or swine brain, human and big brain is a vehicle for communication. Let us compare different theories. For example, like Schopenhauer once said that we all want power, der Wille, and we want to every organism strives for power, that I'm the winner and you're the loser, and we gain power. But this is not the game what the brain wants. Brain urges to be in touch with another brains. How do we know it? From a philosophical point of view, we would like to postulate the same argument that Schopenhauer did in his book Die Welt als Wille und Vorstellung, when he said that how to find out that we all lust for power is that we search our soul. This is an argument from the first person singular. It's an argument how I see the world. It's not the argument that you observe objectively and see this is what happens, but you see what happens inside you. Now this can be considered to be an analogical argument to Schopenhauer's argument. Schopenhauer says that what is relevant for us humans and every organism, we want power over others, but what the brain wants is to be in touch with another brains. For example, think of this debate about the aliens. There's so many literature when the aliens arrive, how to communicate with them. For example, my old friend Jukka Siikala, professor of anthropology, said once that what kind of anthropologist has the best salary in the world? And it's not actually a professor of anthropology, it's the NASA anthropologist, whose job is to communicate with aliens. Here we see all these theories. Whether we should use mathematical language, because mathematics is thought to be universal language, right? If the aliens can communicate, they can communicate with mathematics or logic. And we all recognize this great urge within us to communicate with other brains. And this is what the brain really is from a philosophical point of view. So, but in order to communicate, especially to disagree, we need to agree on many issues. You cannot disagree unless you agree on many central issues. So, we need to, in order to communicate, we need to inhabit the same world. The same world means that we accept that the world is like this, and everyone accepts that the world is like this. We have an agreement, and therefore disagreement is also possible. And now, resistance is provided by the audience precisely for this purpose, to keep the audience and the performer in the same world. If they would think that Poku really conducts the sounds of the city, they would lose their world, because I would not live in the same world as they do, with all the kind of basic assumptions. So they want to keep me in the same world as they are themselves, in order to be able to communicate with me. What the performer is up to, he is leading the way to his own personal world, and he wants the others to follow it, but the others do not follow it, because this is the principle of the narrative flow. They bring resistance by telling themselves it is only as if Poku would be conducting all the sounds. So, resistance is provided by the audience precisely for this purpose, to keep the audience and the performer in the same world. If we follow the performer into his own world, our world separate. So our thesis might be called unification through separation. So what unites us, the audience and the performer, is that I bring the current, the audience brings the resistance, and they together create the voltage. May I see once again there? So, the more I am a performer, I unconduct the sounds of the city, you say it is only as if he conducted the sounds of the city. The more you bring resistance, the more voltage is created. And the voltage is something that keeps us in the same world during the performance. It is what unifies us. It is what makes some space special, because the performance is happening, and this kind of voltage keeps us together. So, in order to be together, you have to bring resistance. So this is, now we go back. So this is what I mean by saying, well, this is what we say by unification through separation, and this is the point. And the last one, probably phase than last slide. The seen from the point of view of the performer. The performance artist, on the other hand, wants to lead the audience to his own world, right? He goes deeper and deeper. However, if he succeeded, it would mean that we went back to the idea of the narrative flow, right? You remember. We just accept that this is fiction and forget the fact that this is not speaking about the real life, about the fictional life. This would mean that you would see the performance as you were reading a book or seeing a movie. But this is not performance art. Following a performance would equal reading a novel, as I said. Success from the point of view of the performer would be the destruction of the presence. Because the presence is brought by the voltage, and the voltage is brought by the resistance that you bring forth, because you see the performance artist doing what we did only, it is only as if he conducted. He doesn't really conduct. So, success from the point of view of performer would mean the destruction of presence, and this cannot happen because the presence is brought by voltage. The voltage is the presence. And is there one left? No, this is the last one.